Ever feel like history is just a bunch of old, dusty names and dates? Well, today we're going to dust off one of the biggest names of the 20th century, Winston Churchill. And trust me, this guy's life story is more action-packed than a Hollywood blockbuster. He was a soldier, a writer, a painter, a politician, and the man who stood up to one of history's greatest villains. But who was he, really? Let's find out. Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was born in 1874 into a very fancy, aristocratic family. His father was a prominent politician, and his mother was an American heiress. You'd think a kid with that background would have it easy, right? Not exactly. Young Winston was a bit of a rebel. He didn't do well in school, often got into trouble, and his teachers thought he was a bit of a lost cause. His own father even wrote him off, thinking he wouldn't amount to much. Talk about pressure. Since a traditional academic path wasn't for him, Winston decided to join the army. He enrolled in the Royal Military College at Sandhurst, and this is where he started to find his footing. He loved the structure, the strategy, and let's be honest, the adventure. After graduating, he wasn't content just sitting around. He wanted to be where the action was. So, he got himself assigned as a war correspondent. This was brilliant. It combined his military training with a talent he was just discovering, writing. He traveled to places like Cuba, India, and Sudan, reporting from the front lines. He wasn't just watching from the sidelines, either. He got into firefights, was involved in cavalry charges, and had some seriously close calls. This period gave him a first-hand understanding of conflict, something that would be crucial later in his life. One of his most famous early adventures happened during the Boer War in South Africa. The armored train he was on was ambushed. Churchill, showing incredible courage, helped clear the tracks and get the wounded to safety. But in the chaos, he was captured and became a prisoner of war. Did he wait for a rescue? Nope. He staged a daring escape, climbing over a wall at night and navigating hundreds of miles through enemy territory with a bounty on his head. He eventually made it to safety, and the story turned him into a national hero back home. This celebrity status was the perfect launchpad for his next career move, politics. In 1900, at the age of 26, Winston Churchill was elected to Parliament. He started as a conservative, just like his father, but he was never one to just toe the party line. He had his own strong opinions, and if he disagreed with his party, he wasn't afraid to say it. In fact, a few years later, he did something almost unthinkable in politics. He crossed the floor and joined the rival Liberal Party. This move showed everyone that Churchill was a man of principle, not just party loyalty. Over the next few decades, he held a bunch of different high-profile government jobs. He was president of the Board of Trade, Home Secretary, and then, in a role he truly loved, First Lord of the Admiralty. This put him in charge of the Royal Navy, the most powerful navy in the world at the time. He pushed for modernization, championing new technologies like airplanes and tanks, which were then in their infancy. He saw the future of warfare was changing, but his career wasn't just a straight line up. He had a major setback during World War I. He was the main architect of the Gallipoli campaign, a plan to attack the Ottoman Empire. The campaign was a disaster, resulting in massive casualties and a humiliating defeat. Churchill was blamed, forced to resign from his post, and his political career seemed to be over. He even rejoined the army and served on the front lines in France for a time. It was a dark period for him, a time he later called his wilderness years. He spent much of the 1920s and 30s out of power, writing, painting, and warning anyone who would listen about a new threat rising in Europe. That threat, of course, was Nazi Germany. While many British leaders were trying to appease Hitler, hoping to avoid another war, Churchill was having none of it. He saw Hitler for the tyrant he was and argued relentlessly that Britain needed to rearm and prepare for a fight. He was dismissed as a warmonger, an old man stuck in the past. But he kept speaking out, his voice a lonely but powerful warning. Then, in 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and the world plunged into World War II. Everything Churchill had been warning about came true. The policy of appeasement had failed. In May 1940, as Nazi forces were storming across Europe and Britain faced its darkest hour, the country needed a new leader, one with courage, experience, and an unbreakable will to fight. There was only one real choice. King George VI asked Winston Churchill to become Prime Minister. At 65 years old, an age when most people are thinking about retirement, Churchill took on the biggest job of his life. His first speech as Prime Minister is legendary. He didn't promise an easy victory. He told the British people he had nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. He was honest about the struggle ahead, but he also inspired them with his absolute refusal to surrender. His radio broadcasts became a lifeline for the nation, his gravelly voice a symbol of defiance. He rallied the people to never surrender during the Battle of Britain, when the Royal Air Force fought off the German Luftwaffe in the skies over England. Churchill's leadership was crucial. He forged a powerful alliance with U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. It was a complicated relationship, especially with Stalin, but Churchill knew they needed to work together to defeat their common enemy. He traveled tirelessly, crossing the Atlantic in dangerous conditions to coordinate strategy. His energy was incredible. He would work late into the night, dictating memos, planning operations, and guiding the war effort with a hands-on approach. He was more than just a politician. He was Britain's warrior-in-chief. Finally, in 1945, the war in Europe ended. Churchill stood on a balcony in London, cheered by massive crowds. He was the man who had saved his country. It's one of history's great ironies that just a few months later, in a general election, the British people voted him out of office. They were grateful for his wartime leadership, but now that the fighting was over, they wanted to focus on rebuilding the country. But Churchill wasn't done yet. He became the leader of the opposition. In 1946, while giving a speech in the United States, he coined a phrase that would define the next era of global politics. He warned that an iron curtain has descended across the continent, describing the division between the free world and the Soviet-controlled Eastern Bloc. This Iron Curtain speech is seen as one of the opening shots of the Cold War. In 1951, he made a comeback. At the age of 76, Churchill became Prime Minister once again. This time, his focus was on navigating the new nuclear age and trying to maintain peace. He served until 1955, when, at the age of 80, he finally retired due to failing health. He spent his final years writing his memoirs, for which he won the Nobel Prize in Literature Painting, and enjoying life as one of the most respected figures in the world. When he passed away in 1965, he was given a state funeral, an honor usually reserved for monarchs. So, what's the legacy of Winston Churchill? He was a complex man. He could be stubborn, arrogant, and he held some views that are controversial today. But he was also a genius, a visionary, and a leader of immense courage. At a moment when civilization itself was on the brink, he refused to back down. He mobilized the language, as he said, and sent it into battle. His story isn't just about winning a war. It's a reminder that even when things look their darkest, one person's determination can change the course of history. It's a lesson in resilience, in speaking truth to power, and in never, ever giving in. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most incredible figures. See you next time.